That time I survived a potential kidnapping. My family had lived in a small steel town, and post-Reagan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia plants were decimated by layoffs. Long story short, I was uprooted from my village life in the Midwest and moved to Connecticut. This was December of 1988, and I was 10 years old. Fast forward a few years, and I had adapted to our new life in a much larger northeastern town. We lived on a rather busy local route, 2 lanes with a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit. The individual family lots had space, but close enough that everyone had a small piece of land. My old town was a village that had 1 traffic light and was less than 2 miles from end to end. Growing up, my friends living in more suburban areas all had paper routes, and once I turned 13, I decided it was my time to do so. I contacted one of the local paper companies, and they stated they had a route open on my street. The caveat was that it was normally a route that was handled by car, as it was 6 miles from end to end. I was used to the bike ride and had an excellent 90s BMX bike that I enjoyed tooling around on. It was a general hustler for anyone that wants to know. I was your typical latchkey child of the 90s. My parents both worked and were out of the house from 7 a.m. until at least 6 at night. I was determined and took the route. All was going well for about 6 months. It was getting near holiday season, and I was anxiously awaiting bill collection week. Back then, everyone paid for the paper in cycles. During the November to December cycles, people would tip much better, and I was hoping to score some decent extra money. After going through my usual route, which was again 6 miles in one direction and maybe 40-ish houses, I had turned around and was headed home for the night, as I had done hundreds of times before. I started my route after school, and usually it took around 2 hours for the entire thing. This day I was running a little later than usual as I was collecting, and the sun was starting to go down as I approached the final few hills that stood in the way of me and my house. At the top of the first hill, where there was a small plaza with a barber and a package store, that's a liquor store for those of you not in New England, I pulled my bike to a stop as I was having issues with the brakes grabbing. As I was adjusting the rear brake by like a contortionist, still seated and facing forwards, I heard someone say, "Hey, paper boy," from the road. I looked over to see a white panel van, surprisingly sans the free candy on the side of it. There were 2 guys riding in front, and it was the one in the passenger seat with the window down that was addressing me. Stunned for a second that someone had stopped in the middle of the road, the guy addressed me again with a, "Hey, paper boy, what's in the bag?" Talking about my courier bag tied to my handlebars. It was at this moment that I heard the door on the back of the van open, and my instincts went haywire. I was a large kid for my age, 5'10" and maybe 150 pounds, but there were 2 large men in the van, and my flight button was pushed. I kicked the pedals on my bike as hard as I could, just as 2 more guys with a length of rope came around the corner of the van on my side of the road. There aren't many houses on this part of the route, and I knew there was no way I was getting up the huge hill where our rental sat on its crest, not with 2 guys in a van after me. I booked it to the one house I could see with the lights on, ditched my bike with a running dismount, and started simultaneously pounding on their door and trying to open it. Thank the fates that the owners were near the entrance as they opened it almost immediately. I was so out of breath I couldn't talk, but managed to gasp out a "help" while pointing back at the road. At this point, the 2 guys on foot made it to the edge of the lawn, and the van was slinking down the road. The nice family took me in and deadbolted the door. I could hear from outside, though, a very loud, "We'll see you tomorrow, paper boy," followed by the van taking off. The police were called, and a report was filed. They escorted me the less than a quarter a mile to my house, with my bike in the trunk and me in the back of the cruiser. My parents were actually home, as the ordeal had taken a moment, and waiting for the cops at the stranger's house took some time as well. That was the last time I ever ran that route, being too spooked and my parents insisting it was too dangerous. I am still not sure if I was about to be a crime of circumstance, a robbery victim, or on a milk carton. Hey, it was a real thing in the 90s, but I'm thankful for those people for answering their door and for the downhill that I was on heading home.